All right, so to be mindful of time, we will get started. And as a reminder, this webinar will be recorded, so we'll be able to send it out after. Thank you all for joining us again on one of our 9th, 10th grade parents coffee chats. Hopefully you are at home cozy or somewhere cozy with a coffee or tea. I have mine right next to me. And we do this every fall and spring as an opportunity to connect you all with the college office. So my name is Joelle Chen. I'm one of the associate directors of college counseling, and I'm joined by my amazing colleagues who I will let introduce themselves. Carolyn, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Carolyn Middleton. I'm the director of college counseling here at Berkeley Carroll. I'm the one that you get many, many emails from, and you will continue to get many, many emails from.
Hi everyone, my name is Luis Almonte. I'm one of the associate directors of college counseling at Berkeley Carroll, and I'm the one that emails about testing.
Good morning. I am Mary Dunn. I am the College Office Operations Manager. It's a long title, but there's a lot that I take care of. And I look forward to working with the students. That's the best part of my job, is working with the students and my colleagues.
I'm glad we're second, Mary. And Mary does do a lot. So as we get in the process, you will definitely be hearing from her more. So as I mentioned, we have these sessions every fall and spring, often in the fall, a little bit more structured. I think we did our like top 10 things that we wanted to chat about in the fall. But in the spring, we find that it's really helpful to hear beyond us. And so today we have a panel of parents who have just finished this process or have done this process before so that you're able to hear from them, ask questions about what this college experience has been like. So we're going to discuss some of the questions that you all raised, and then we'll have opportunity for Q&A as well. So there's a Q&A or a chat box. If you want to put your questions in there, we'll try to get to those. But before we dive in and allow the parents to introduce themselves, we did have a couple of questions about timeline and overview that we thought could be helpful to start off with, just so that everyone's on the same page. So I think we have an image we'll be able to share. Perfect. So I know everyone's in a different space right now. We have 9th grade parents and guardians, 10th grade parents and guardians, but we did want to talk a little bit about what will happen junior year when I think it starts to get really busy. So in 9th grade, we in the college office, we meet with students in these sessions where we start to introduce ourselves, make sure that they are not terrified of us. We're friendly people. We want them to be excited about the college process. Sophomore year, we start to meet with them more frequently. We had a dating game, which was a fun throwback. I don't think any of the students understood the reference, but that's okay. It was fun for us. And it was an opportunity for them to think about fit and match. We had a great conversation with them last week, just going through some Q&As that's on their mind. But thinking about sophomore fall is when it really starts to get a little bit busier. So we'll have a college night for all juniors and their parents and guardians, usually September or October in the fall, to kind of really kickstart the process, go more in depth on the timeline and on our next steps. We have additional grade meetings with the college office, with the juniors. They will see us far too much, but that's great. So they can ask us questions. They can really make sure they feel comfortable and confident going into this process. We also are going to continue to have financial aid seminars with College Money Method. You probably received an email from Carolyn about these sessions that have been offered for 9th and 10th, to really start thinking about how to prepare for paying for college, what to start thinking about when it comes to financial aid. In 11th grade, it gets a little bit more specific as we're getting closer to submitting those financial aid documents. And then you will be assigned a college counselor early December, usually late November. The three of us, Lewis, myself, Carolyn, we work very, very closely together. We'll often hive mind things together, but you will have a designated point person that you'll be able to go to really ask your questions, to really get to know, and for us to get to know your student very well. So we all write letters of recommendation, and we find that it's really great to have that one person that really understands your student, their story, and is able to talk about that. There'll be surveys and questionnaires that you all, both the student and the parent and guardian, will have to fill out. That's really helpful for us. We sometimes get great anecdotes from them that we use in our letter of recommendation. It helps us get context about the students, and those are necessary before we have our meetings. So you'll be assigned a college counselor in November, December. And then we'll start to have meetings, usually in late December at the earliest, but mainly January and February. First meeting is with the student, and then we meet together as a family. So this is kind of the overview for the fall. It of course gets a little busier. We're working with juniors right now on extracurricular activities. We just had a college fair, which was really exciting. So we really try to slowly kind of increase the workload, increase the focus on college, make sure it's not the sole focus. They're still high school students. They still have so much to explore, but just to give an overview of the timeline. So now to pivot a little bit, we have, what is it, 6, I believe, incredible parents who have finished up the process. We even have one who has gone through this process twice now, and we'll be able to talk a little bit about their experience. So I'm going to have them introduce themselves before we get to the questions. Corey, if you feel comfortable, you were first here. I will put to you to introduce yourself first.
Sure. My name's Corey Jacobs. My son Jules is a senior. He's heading to Stanford in the fall. He was really interested in engineering and music, and the college office was amazing.
Thank you. I'm going to go around. Yes, Rachel.
Hi, my name's Rachel Loeb. My son Solomon Block is headed to Swarthmore in the fall. He was accepted early, so we've been finished for a long time. We could talk about that. And he is very interested in classics, so he's studying classics is his intention, as well as maybe some chemistry. And I would say also we worked primarily with Lewis, and it was great.
Paul, you can go ahead.
Hi, my name's Paul Edelstein. My son Daniel is a senior. He's heading to the University of Pennsylvania, much to the relief of his mom, who did not want him to head to Stanford, which was high on his list. So we're very happy that he's there. I also have a son, Aaron, who's a 10th grader. So we're sort of entering the process right now. We had a fantastic experience all around, mostly due to this office and really the pace that this office set, which is interesting to be here now because I'm sort of getting a reset in my own mind about how we paced this thing out for Daniel, and that was a big factor in getting through it. So it should be good for everybody.
Anna?
Oh, hi, good morning. My name is Anna Malik. My daughter Ava is headed to WashU in St. Louis. She's going to be studying physiological and brain sciences, which was an interest of hers starting sophomore year. So we had an incredible experience with Miss Chen. And we couldn't have done it without her, honestly, and just everyone that's, on staff. So just to start off, I will say you will be taken care of. You will get all your all your questions answered. And it is a stressful process, but you'll get through it. And with a lot of support, and look forward to answering whatever questions anyone has.
Yeah. Yufasa?
Hi, good morning. My name is Yufasaha Yarish. My daughter is Hypatia Yarish. She will be going to Skidmore in the fall. She also was admitted early decision. Yeah, I cannot say enough about this group of fabulous heroes, and especially Miss Chen, who was very much my therapist during the past couple of years, and helping to guide me and direct me, and also play triage with my daughter, honestly. So it's a very, very big job, and we are so happy to have the support.
Nell, go for it.
Hi, I'm Nell Daniel, and I'm a mom of 2 at Berkeley Carroll. One graduated last year and got into Hamilton early decision, where she's super happy because of the open curriculum, and she's doing music and theater, really thriving. And then my son Quinn in this class got in early to Savannah College of Art and Design because he really wants to do half and half acting and filmmaking, and he needed and wanted to hit the ground running at a really accelerated advanced level, and that is the college where you can do that. So he's super happy. I'm also a teacher at Berkeley Carroll. So I teach design and art and design history. And I've always, for 10 years, worked with students on their portfolios. In a previous life, I was director of admissions at Parsons and also served on RISD's board. So I've always coached kids at school and outside of school on their portfolios. So I know a ton about how a portfolio can help students who are going into art and design, but also how a portfolio can help any kid who, if they have art and design work and they want to go to Cornell to be a brain surgeon, that portfolio can help show that they're an innovative design thinker. So I know a ton about that. Happy to be a resource on that and answer questions. And also, I'll just say I adore my colleagues, Carolyn, Joelle, and Lewis, and Mary, and it's really fun working with them, and they're just extraordinary human beings. So yes, I've had moments of tears in maybe all of their offices as a mom and different things. So they are fantastic people. And again, I just reiterate, you couldn't be in better hands. Thank you.
Thank you all so much, and for such kind words. I promise we did not pay them to say that. So thank you all. So to start off, we're going to talk about a couple of different topics that came up in that survey that Carolyn sent out, just getting a sense of what's on your mind. What are you all thinking about? And I think something that really came up was like visiting colleges. How do we demonstrate interest? I know that might have been couple years ago for you all that you started visiting colleges. But to start, when did your family start seriously thinking about college? And what were some of the first steps that you all took? And Rachel, I see that you're ready.
Yeah. Well, so one thing that we did his sophomore year, I think it was we went up to, or maybe it was fall of junior year. We went up to Boston for a long weekend in the fall and just went and visited a bunch of schools. Not to say these are schools, but these are archetypes of schools because there's so many there. So we went to big schools, little schools, urban schools, sort of visit them all, and we could hit them all over the weekend. And I think it was a really helpful thing for Saul to see what does it look like to be in a really like a BU, urban, or a campus, suburban, near a city, and really emphasize we're not looking at the schools, just the kind of schools, and sort of practice asking questions and going on tours. The other thing we did was he went and spent a weekend with a cousin up at Yale and just like hung out and went to classes and sort of did stuff and did tours. So he could again sort of see what that experience was like with cousins who were there, without us being nosy and asking questions that he wasn't interested in. So that was like, we just did some trial and error stuff. And I think it came back so that when he met with Lewis, it was like, oh, I think I want to be near a city. I don't necessarily want to be in a city, but definitely want to be near a city. And because I'm a city kid. And that helped a lot. It also, and then in junior spring, did a big trip, and we spent spring break doing a real big trip. And our child knows himself pretty well, and he knew that he did not want a big school at all. And so it was great. We just never looked at anything over 10,000 kids, like never, never, never. But as we traveled and as he visited, it became clear to him that what the kind of classroom environment that he wanted, and realized like, oh, even in a school of 8,000 kids, like my intro classes are hundreds of kids. And sort of knowing that that was something that he might not like as much. And so it actually became smaller and smaller and smaller, and sort of focusing more on smaller liberal arts schools. And I will say the other thing was that we learned on looking at schools was to keep our mouth shut. Don't ask questions, let them ask the questions. If we flinched or liked something, then he didn't like it. So really just kind of like being there. We went to visit my alma mater, and I think he did that just because to appease me. But it was really interesting to sort of watch somebody learn and be able to articulate what they like and what they don't like, or what speaks to him. And when he got to Swarthmore, he was like, this is different, this is special. It talks to me, it speaks to me. And it became very, very clear. So it's interesting to sort of watch that and step back. The only other thing I'll say, so the big process was in the beginning, to give yourself time and not rush it. And because the time does work, the schedule does work. And and if you can step back, I think the thing that we tried to do is step back and see this as also as like a pedagogical experience, a process for the kids. They learn so much about themselves. If you have boys, sometimes they don't know how to like talk about themselves that much. So even watching them learn how to like talk about who they are and the executive functioning skills that they gain just through the process of like reaching out, scheduling tours and getting on Canvas. So we tried to see it through that lens as well as just how much they're learning as humans and sort of practicing being adults and advocating for themselves. Not saying we didn't have our moments of tension, but that really helped us sort of say, let's watch this person grow into an adult that they're about to become. Helped a lot, I think, at least for me. And then I was sort of amazed with the process of how they came through it.
Thank you. Anyone else wanted to add about their experience?
Sure, I'll jump in. So we really started thinking about it at the junior meeting kickoff. That's when we kind of said like, okay, we're starting, and knew that spring break was kind of a target goal of going on tours. So there are a few things about the spring break trip that I think I'm so glad we did that. I think number one, because it was critical to see schools when they were in session. We visited one school that didn't, because they have different spring breaks than we do. So there was a lot of just like matrix of like when schools were in session over those 2 weeks and when they weren't. And there was one school that we didn't see in session. And it was so clear that we just couldn't get a feeling for the school. We liked it, but there's so much to be gained. So I feel like was really critical for us. Another great tip that Mr. Almonte gave us was to reach out to any BC alums at the school, which, was not something he was super psyched to reach out to a stranger and be like, hey, want to have coffee? Also as a teenage boy, but it was great. It was great. He did it. He learned things you couldn't learn on the tour, even though they didn't know each other necessarily. He's like, well, we're not friends. I was like, you have Berkeley Carroll in common. You have Brooklyn in common. You have a lot in common. So that was great. We did that at many schools and they were always willing to have coffee, super happy to do that. The other thing we learned about from Miss Cook was, and I know also from friends, is if your kid is really interested in something, reach out to the teachers that teach that subject and try and connect. So Jules met with, music teachers at almost every school we visited. And in his case, asked for kind of a sample lesson. And I didn't even know that was something we would do. And so you kind of, some teachers charge you, some don't, but that was really critical in saying like, hey, if I'm going to spend 4 years with this person, if he was doing a double major, do I like them? So another parent at BC said she got to Northwestern and she hadn't met the cello teacher who ran the cello studio and didn't connect. And it was like, ended up going into Northwestern for lessons when, she was at this college for 4 years. So that was really helpful. And then the other thing, echoing what Rachel said, was like, Jules thought he kind of wanted to be in a city. And then through the process of visiting was like, hey, I love Evanston. Like, I love this like small college town. He ended up loving University of Michigan, like loved, I was like Ann Arbor, wow, okay, but loved it. And then saw Stanford's campus, which, it's close to San Francisco, but you don't go in all the time. Like kids stay on campus and ended up really like that just really appealed to him. So I think that's so interesting to see like, okay, this is my idea. And then having the like encouraging the openness and like Rachel said, like blank slate, like letting them figure it out on their own, what all of a sudden feels like a spark to them. So that's my spiel.
Paul, go ahead.
This is really interesting to hear. I think part of the process for us was us going through the process as parents and learning about ourselves and what our desires were for our kids. And that really changed from the beginning to the end. And a big component of that was when we saw the West Coast schools, Stanford and UCLA and USC. And of course, they're amazing. Who wouldn't like them? And Daniel understandably fell in love with them. But Daniel's mom was not exactly in love with the thought of him going to the West Coast. And so that was a big process for us as parents. And we spent a lot of time talking to each other about what we were going to disseminate to Daniel. And that's what you're hearing from some of these other parents. In other words, not interjecting our feelings is a very hard thing to do as parents. What your desires are for your children, and when and where. And for us, an easy example was West Coast versus East Coast. And ultimately, there was a lot of trepidation, mostly on Maritz's behalf, about how much he really liked what he saw out west. And we sort of went through various plans. Well, we'll do this, we'll do that. And ultimately, every single thing we thought we were going to do or say to him, we abandoned and just let him really lead the process, with Lewis guiding us and us sort of watching it from the side. And thankfully, that was a great strategy, because in the end, he ended up choosing, Penn. That became his first choice, which clandestinely would have been our first choice. But we never really let him know that. We let him come to that decision on his own, and it worked out that way. And I think, had we done things differently, in other words, had we interjected what our thoughts or desires were to him throughout the process, it might have ended up a little bit differently, and certainly would have made the process a lot more difficult. So that was a learning process for us that we had to go through, that I guess in the beginning I never really envisioned, that hey, we need to learn about ourselves and our own desires for our child and learn how to manage them. And it was a big deal.
Anna, are you going to say something?
Yes, I would love to. I think for us, we kind of went through a very different process, because my daughter was she was a recruited athlete for volleyball. So we were looking at a lot of the smaller liberal arts schools, but we also started to look at some of the, I guess, regular schools at the same time, which made the process, it's a bifurcated process. So we kind of went through the process 2 times in one child. I think for us, something that a big takeaway for us is, I think because we knew all of the work that was required, and we could see ahead that we were doing, 2 processes, we wanted to hurry the process along. We have to go visit these colleges. We have to, talk to coaches, do the camps, do the calls with coaches, etc. But we needed to wait until our daughter was ready. And anytime we said, hey, let's go visit this campus, let's say sophomore year, where we're like, we're ready to go, like we have time, like we're going to be in the neighborhood, she had no interest. And I think it's like, looking back, I think I'm glad we let her take the lead on that, because honestly, she wasn't ready at the time. It wouldn't have benefited her to go, she wouldn't have appreciated, visiting my alma mater, like James's, like she just, it wouldn't have resonated, because she was still deep into Berkeley Carroll, like just being a high school student. What we did end up doing that helped tremendously is the summer between sophomore and junior year, she did a 2-week program at, she did it at Harvard, but it could have been anywhere, because she thought she might like psychology. So she wasn't able to take it at school at the time. So she took a class, was interested. She got to hang out with students from, around the world. She stayed on campus. And that for her was kind of the moment that opened her eyes to, oh, I think I do want to think about college. I am interested. And these are the things that I would be looking for. And I think it really helped her narrow down like what she was looking for in a college. So I think, again, like, I think listen to your student, and everyone's going to go at a slightly different pace. You will still have time to do everything, but you need to make sure your student's ready to go.
Go ahead now.
Hi. So as someone who's been advising students on college for 30 years as a teacher, And also as a mom, I just want to reiterate, I'm a huge fan of pre-college programs. You can do them locally, you could travel, but it's really good for kids to just be on the campus, meet other students. But also, I think in particular, if they're wondering whether to specialize or not, like for me, art, focus on art and design or not, it's really good to just jump into a pre-college program in one of those specialties to see how it feels, and then they get the feeling of what's on the campus and so on. But so yeah, just huge fan of pre-college programs, even if it's just a local one or traveling. Extremely helpful catalyst in them knowing what they want.
Add a few thoughts here. I feel like it was the end of maybe the middle of junior year when Hypatia came home one day and said, "Mommy, I'm going to college." I think it wasn't, I never made, me and her dad never made it a foregone conclusion that she would go to college. I think that that is a very individualized decision, and it's about who our child is and what her passions are. And frankly, she was still figuring all that out and trying to keep her head above water with her studies. Um, and I think that that really did inspire her. But I don't think we've really started mobilizing on the college search until after winter break, junior year. Again, like some others have said, around the kickoff that the college office has. And the junior year is tremendously tough for our students. There is a lot of work, and I never pressured her to, jump into yet another thing that she had to do. So we did start college tours during spring break, and again, just letting her set the pace for how much she was able to, you know, dedicate mind share to to doing some of that research and figuring out the list. But Joelle and I spent a good amount of time strategizing on the back end. Like, if these are the schools that she wanted to go to, how can we reasonably get to them? What was efficient and affordable for us to get to them? I mean, we were road trip mapping. So, and then I would, sort of get some input from Hypatia. Where did she want to start? So I think by the time we ended up on campus, it wasn't really this fantasy of, um, imagining where she would be. It was a very, very stressful time during spring break, very stressful. I was scared out of my head and wouldn't show it, that I'm sending my daughter off. It all started to become very real. And I did a lot of chauffeuring and a lot of not talking. My personal rule was not to ask questions on the tour, because Hypatia is very independent and very in her own mind. And I needed her to know that she was in the driver's seat for this process and I was in the back seat. So I focused on financial aid, frankly. That was my sole, pretty much whole focus on understanding that process. And Joelle made sure that I had the resources and put me in touch with Paul from College Money Matters, and I spoke to him at least twice to get his advice and guidance, and it was extremely helpful. So that was us.
So in understanding the process, when a student is in junior year, your student receives and the family receives a preliminary college list of around 30 schools that are categorized by reaches, middles, and foundations. And then students are always welcome and encouraged to look beyond the list. So how did you all approach narrowing down that list? What was your students' criteria that they were looking for that made a college a good fit for them? What did you think made a college a good fit for them, and how did you find a compromise in narrowing down the list and picking the schools that your student was going to apply to?
All right, I guess I'll go first again. So I think since one thing that became a very easy, because you have this big list and it comes from that big, they fill out this form, And I can't remember when they fill out the survey and when we fill out the survey. I think you said it in your timeline, end of sophomore year, beginning of junior year. But then they start visiting schools that we discussed. So things actually evolve. So sometimes the list, I can't remember if the list was sort of generated before or after tours, and so it evolves. But since Solomon knew that he was interested in classics, one day he just sat, it was like a rainy day, and looked at all the schools. And if they didn't have the program, it was like, cut it off the list. It was kind of like therapeutic, right? Like, because you're sort of overwhelmed by all this stuff. And sort of he started to get clear about what his criteria were. And if they weren't, so then I think by the process of looking on like 30 college websites, you start to see things and patterns as well. He was also not interested in a social scene that was based on Greek life or anything like that. So it was more of a process of elimination, I would say, also by like, what were those criteria that were most important to him? So, a very strong, like on campus, residential life, a school where you're like looking on Instagram to find your roommate was not going to be a good fit. So some of it was academic, some of it was social, some of it was like culture, and sort of going through that process of eliminating schools. I will say that we, much to like Paul, even though we said like, okay, we're back, we're not gonna tell him what to do. There is a little like, puppet movement from behind and seed planting and like, whether we would talk to you, Lewis, or like some other folks of saying, I think these could be some good fits. Maybe you should take another look at that, or what about this? So things that, you do know your child. So I do think, whilst it's important to stay away and let them find themselves, we did a little bit of behind the scenes kind of, let's look at this again, let's look at that again. We didn't have the same, my husband and I both like moved across the country when we went to college, so we didn't have any sort of geographical priorities for our child. But I think sort of that process of really spending time and thinking was really helpful to go through the list. I don't think anything really popped up. And then it was also him talking to people, right? And just talking to lots of people and getting feedback. And then it became pretty, after the trips and visiting some schools, it became very focused on sort of, or narrowed down on like feel, size, culture, what academics it offered. And it became pretty clear by the end of the junior year, kind of what that list of the top 5 were, I would say. But even, and I'm remembering this, Lewis, like even, you had like, it was sort of it was clear to know like what the reaches were and kind of the middle, but then also filling up like the what's the word we use for safety now? I can't remember.
Foundations.
Foundation, thank you. So sort of that was still always kind of under development, right? And sort of reviewing and making sure that you had enough schools on that list because of the way the process works. So I would say that the ones that he was really clear about became pretty clear by the end of junior year, and visits in summer. And then the other ones were more in flux. And sometimes I didn't understand why a school was on a list. It just seemed to, something about it talked to him. And I was like, okay, fine, whatever. But like, but there was the criteria around meeting academic, social life, the kind of culture and things like that, and size.
Paul?
Well, yeah, I can really echo that. I mean, the lists were great because it gave us insight into things that Daniel was thinking about without us sort of prying, and then enabled us to ask questions of him. Why is this on your list, or why did you remove that? And I remember I can't remember which school, but there was one that we were surprised that he said no, that's out. And it enabled us to organically have a much better insight into what he was thinking and why. And then, of course, we had Lewis behind the scenes. So the puppet master aspect is very, very accurate. You're able to stay out of it and not be overly influential on your child, but at the same time know what he's thinking and why. And there's no question I think we disseminated information to Daniel through Lewis, through observations that we had about him and what we thought. And it oftentimes, I think it might have been a better message or better received message for Daniel when it was received through Lewis rather than directly from us. And then we would kind of hear it on the back end. So this sort of, connection between, and the list, I think, was a big factor of it, because, and you're able to access the list repeatedly, on the computer system. So you could sort of see what your kid's doing without prying, without saying, where are you? What are you doing and why? You could sort of see changes happening. And then I know we had a couple of conversations with Lewis for sure without Daniel, where we all three discussed what he was thinking and why, and what Lewis thought and why, and what we thought and why. And so this combination of things really, really, really worked well. And that list is a great starting point for it.
I love the list. I have close friends who are also going through the college search process at other schools. Um, Many of them at public schools who just did not know where to start. And the questionnaire is a beautiful way to sort of separately between Hypatia and myself, articulating what we were looking for and what our thoughts were and who are we as a family. Um, and that, I think, helped us both started to think, okay, what are the possibilities and what are our options? Um, Frankly, there were a lot of colleges on the list that I'd never even heard of. So that was an educational moment for me. After the list, however, like that sort of streamlining it and culling it down sat entirely with Hypatia. I remember though trying to, score took some time to get used to that database, honestly. And it really was dependent on Hypatia making sure that she kept it updated. And that was not happening all the time. So toward, you know, entering into summertime when it became apparent that getting her list firmed up was becoming more and more important, I had to kind of chase her a little bit to find out what was going on her end, and also check in with Joelle around, how do I use SCORE and how do I navigate it and find some things that I was interested in learning more about. But once you sort of get the handle of it, it's extremely valuable. There is a lot of information there at your fingertips that you can use as a jump off point to find out more about some of these schools. So yeah, really, really awesome process that first semester.
I'll jump in just to make a plug for the guides. I mean, I never thought, so we got this incredible list from Mr. Almonte, many schools we didn't know about. And you can go to the college websites and kind of see how they market themselves. But I was surprised how helpful the, Princeton and Fisk guides were in terms of just getting a sense of like, what's the culture of the school? What's the feeling of the school? To Rachel's point, how many percentage of kids are in sororities and fraternities? Because that tells you a little bit of, it can be positive or negative, but maybe like what is appealing to your kid. And so those were good in just helping, like, because just as parents, it would be like, oh, I know one kid who went to that school, 30 years ago, and that's how I think about that school. And that's not an accurate reflection of what the school is like now. So kind of like our preconceived notions of like what a college is like based on one person who went there from my high school. Back in the day. So yeah, that was that's just something to say, like those guides I think are actually, I mean, they're not your ending point, but they were really helpful in just trying to, like, it's a big list and it's overwhelming to just try and learn about these schools. And then of course just like talking to everybody and kind of interviewing them. When I knew, friends who had been through the process in the last couple of years, and I just asked a lot of questions.
Anna and then Nell.
Sure. I wanted to say, so the list that we got from Miss Chen, in, I guess it was junior of the fall year, was a very different list than where she ended up applying senior year, like, the night before the applications were due for us, if I'm being very honest on some of them. Although she did end up applying early and early action. And I think that's a really important point, is that the list that you start with is not the list necessarily. Maybe it is for some students, but at least for us, it's not what we ended up with. Your child grows so much during the process. They learn things that, like my daughter initially was just like, I want to be on either the East Coast or the West Coast. I mean, she's going to Missouri, like, which is right in the middle Midwest city. And I think she also initially thought, because she was going through the recruiting process and she was looking mostly at D3 schools, that she was only looking at the small liberal arts colleges, which tend to be, 2,000 and below students. And we got her, you know, we visited some of the schools. We went to volleyball games, we went to football games, we, made little detours to the bookstores, did whatever we could to get her to start thinking, oh, a school with 10,000, under 10,000 students is actually quite manageable and fun. And I think talking to other kids who go to that size school, she realized um, you're still meeting people, new people every day. But when you walk through campus, you'll know kids. Which I think for her is, like, especially coming from a school the size of Berkeley Carroll, was really important. And I think that's also a really big, it's something to consider, is how your child feels about going to a smaller school like a Berkeley Carroll in a very big city. Is that something that they're looking for, in college? But to whittle down the very large list, we did look at the rankings. I know you shouldn't, and we learned a lot of lessons with the rankings, but I don't know, we took like the top 100 schools. Since she knew she wanted a school, we got her under 10,000. That knocks out like the Michigan, the UT, the most of the California schools. I had no idea they were like 30,000 kids. So that very quickly knocked out a lot of schools. Someone mentioned major. So if she knew she wanted to be a psych major and they didn't have a good offering or a highly ranked program, I mean, we knew that wasn't going to happen. I know a lot of kids changed major, so it was really about the strength of the overall arts and sciences program. I think we actually ended up, instead of saying she only wanted to be East Coast, West Coast originally, she realized what she wanted was to be near civilization. So that can mean a lot of things. But really, she didn't necessarily need to be in a large city like New York. You're not going to get another one, another New York City in the US. But she knew that she needed to be able to, drive under 30 minutes and be able to take a train or get on a plane. So that knocked out a lot of schools. Also, Greek life was important for her, as in it should not dominate the campus. Again, you'd be surprised. That will knock out a lot of schools also. And I think finally, Reddit was a gold mine, honestly. Like, she actually spent a lot of time on Reddit. I spent a lot of time on Reddit. I learned so much. And she also said the other source I think that helped a lot in determining the list was the blue guides that someone else talked about. In your blue guide, I just want to say this very quickly because it was super helpful. There's a little section at the end of every write-up that says, it's basically like, if you like this college, you'll also like this college. We mapped out, once she knew her dream school, well, or no, she had many, but once she knew like which schools she really loved, we went through that guide, and then you had 5 more schools to research that you would have never, like, I'd never heard of, or it just something that we weren't thinking about. And then you keep going through the process and you end up with, a really amazing list. But a lot of it, back to Miss Chen, who, you know, introduced us to so many schools and a lot of factors that we just didn't even know about going into the process. But yeah, that was us.
Go ahead, Nell.
I just was going to say really quick, because I think the question was like, how do you know when when it feels right or if it's a fit? I really don't underestimate the vibe. Let your kid notice the vibe. I mean, I would have my students, my kids, um, like write after we left the school or while we're at the school, like sit down and have a coffee and just like write down what you're feeling, what you're noticing, and like really pay attention. The other trick I've learned from another parent was read the school newspapers that are written by the students. It's a chance to really know, another perspective that's different than what the school is actively promoting. If you really want to know what the students are thinking and feeling, and their like specific sense of humor and their quirkiness, that just says a lot about the school culture. So yeah.
I wanted to jump in with a question about extracurricular activities. A lot of the 9th and 10th grade families, I think, are looking for the right list of involvements, kind of thinking about there's some kind of magic involved in this. And we provide a guide that's, gosh, about 20 pages long with summer and school year enrichment opportunities. But we know that families find many ways to get involved, and students find many ways to get involved. Some of you mentioned college programs. I wondered if there were other things that you found to be really helpful in helping your student to engage with opportunities for leadership, opportunities to get involved in something, opportunities to find, what they're genuinely interested in. I know we've already had sophomores coming into our office after our session with them last week saying, how do I find out about leadership? And like there's one answer to that. So I wondered if you could share a little bit with the parents on the call about how your student may have found those deeper interests or areas that they wanted to explore outside of the academic programs.
Uh, so I'll say that I think that what you guys say is true. I think based on our experience is that if the kid is doing what they are truly passionate about, it comes through. And they are stories, and if they really just find what they love and then do that and do it with commitment and with their whole heart,
Mhm.
then they can really talk about it. And then leadership opportunities come from doing something, doing it deeply, and doing it with conviction and commitment. So, like just thinking about our own child, he was a very committed Jewish summer camp kid. Did that for all the years, went to Israel after sophomore year, and then worked at the camp. So, not that he wrote about it, but that was like how he spent his summers. But then he also, on his own volition, continued to study after he finished his bar mitzvah with the rabbi. He continued to be involved with the youth group at his synagogue and became a leader there, got involved in the Jewish Culture Club. So this was like very much part of who he was. And I think he talked about that. That is his defining community. And leadership came out of that, being on the board of various things. And and he stayed with baseball. He's not a great athlete, but he just loved it. That was his thing. And showed up every day, every practice. Stayed with the theater program again, not Quinn, but like loved it. That was his community, did it all the time, and it made him happy. And then the other thing that made him happy and he did all the time, which he really ended up writing about, was his library. And he volunteered at the library, at the Brooklyn Library, every week since ninth grade. Nobody else did. He just loved the library. And so that's what he did. And that's how he spent a lot of his time. And it actually ended up being what he wrote his essay about. But so, was he the leading person? But no, he was like, if you go in the info desk, that he's your guy on Sunday. So I would just say that there's no formula, there's no magic thing. And I think I've heard from others and people and sisters who like when it looks contrived and it looks like you're checking off things and filling it out to make it, oh, I solved cancer at, like people can see through it. So just let your kid be themselves and do something deeply and passionately. And I think the leadership comes from that.
Yeah, I would totally agree with Rachel. I do remember what might have been in 9th or 10th grade, and even Jane said the same. Don't try to over orchestrate or overthink your child's extracurricular activities. It will come. And I think the same advice was also given for how they select their courses, every year to focus on the things that are genuine interest for them. And that is exactly what Hypatia did. But her interest did not start in 9th or 10th grade. She has had some very core interests coming out of middle school and even elementary school. She's been dancing for over 10 years, and she's continued to do that at Berkeley Carroll and outside of Berkeley Carroll. And she loves children, so she has a regular babysitting gig with 2 families, and she has done that all throughout high school. Um, and that kind of led her into key society, and that was something that she took a deep interest in before 11th grade. And she has a close relationship with the admissions office and was able to, was selected as a key. And all the other extracurricular activities sort of spurred out of just her being curious and having a terrific network of administrators and teachers at school that encouraged her, as well as the volunteer she does. So it happens because Berkeley Carroll is a community that inspires our children. And there are so many people that are helping to encourage them to try something new, to explore something. Oh, you like that? Why don't you, consider looking into this? And it's not just for college, it's because we want them to be enriched and well-rounded human beings.
Paul, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think Daniel, in terms of seeking their own path, I think Daniel was just really well prepared as a person, as like a human, to be comfortable with who he is and what he wanted to seek out. And that obviously happened over a long period of time at Berkeley Carroll. And we saw that when we were looking at colleges because he was seeking out like the Latinx clubs and the things that really appealed to him, the music, all on his own. While I was looking at the athletics and the student body and wanting to see where the union was and the cities, he was had his own plan as to what he wanted to see at the school, and which we followed. And so I think that came through a long period of time at Berkeley Carroll. It wouldn't have come organically overnight, like in other words, you thinking where to look and where to go. And we saw that demonstrated wherever we went. And also the summer programs, he did a few also, I think gave him great insight into what other kids were thinking and what the environment was like on these schools. So those things all combined to have him find his own path.
Thank you all. I'm going to hop in real quick just to be mindful of time because I know we have some questions in the chat. So something that's come up in conversations with 9th and 10th grade families, and I think just happens in college admissions, is using outside support services. So we have an attendee who's asking, I hear of many parents hiring outside college consultants. We would love to not do this, but did any of you hire outside of a standardized test tutor? And if you could talk briefly about what that experience was like. Corey, please.
Well, we did go, first I'll just say quickly, before we had our junior year college meeting, and I'd really met all of you, somebody had said, oh, you should talk to this person. They advised me, they were so great. And Jules had said, we're not going to need that. Like the college office is amazing. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just meet with her. I hadn't even gone to the meeting yet. And I did. And then I went to that meeting and I was like, no, thank you. Not needed. Test prep was, we went to the talk that Compass gave at Berkeley Carroll, which just like normally I feel like I'd be, yeah, just I really liked their presentation. I liked their approach. And so Jules did do a little of that before the PSAT because he heard that if you do well in the PSAT, you can qualify to be a merit scholar, which was something I didn't even wasn't on my radar. So he really led that and then did, you know, a certain amount of targeted prep for the SAT. So those are the outside resources we use. And again, people were like, you should do it for the essay, and Jules was like, no. So it was like all the support came from Mr. Almonte in your office in terms of what we needed, but we did do test prep.
Nell, please.
Hi, just to ditto, and from the perspective of a parent of two from Berkeley Carroll and teacher of 30 years, and I've been in admissions as a person and just a colleague, like you really don't need someone else, and it can really just add a layer. I don't know, it's just an extra layer you don't need, and it's really, really expensive, those independent college counselors. So I would say save your money and put it in other places because this team is extraordinary. And I know a lot of students from other schools, other independent schools, who have nowhere near the amount of support. And just the fact that Joelle and Lewis and Carolyn and Mary are so integrated into our community, like they're advisors, they know the community, they know what's going on. Like it just really is an amazing support. I don't think you need an independent counselor. Save the money, put it other places. Pay for that pre-college program, you know.
Please, Rachel.
So we did have someone helping Solomon with his essay. Frankly, we had a whole discussion with him about, you know, writing and generating the ideas, and that between school or us that we thought we could handle it. He said he thought that for our relationship, it might be helpful if somebody else was doing that. And he's probably, again, self-aware enough and right. For our child, and again, I'm just speaking for our son, figuring out how to talk about himself was really hard. It was not natural, and sort of becoming vulnerable and sort of telling those stories took time for him. And it's just who he is. And so having somebody help him and brainstorm on those ideas and bring them out and feel comfortable about actually saying some of these things out loud, which isn't natural, and this is just, I'm speaking for our child, was really helpful. And so that person, a third party, not your parent, not judging you, not feeling like, you know, again, so sort of saying, you know, that, oh, using your college advisors, you can say things to them that you won't say to your parents. It was sort of another way too, where I'm not going to say this in front of my mom and dad. So that's what we did. But we didn't have to spend a ton of money. So also, like, on that point, like you hear some things about what people spend in some places, and it's crazy.
All right. Well, I know we are very, very close to time. So I did want to ask like one final quick question from you all. I think it's come up in the chat a little bit, of any final piece of advice that you could give these parents as they're starting to really dive into the college process and starting to guide their student off to that next chapter. Corey, please.
You guys said this in one of your talks to us, and it was my favorite piece of advice. So everybody here is probably going to hear it from you, but I'll just make sure. You were talking to the kids, and you said throughout this whole process, a lot of people are going to say, where do you want to go? What are you going to do? And it just becomes a super repetitive question for your kid that's, like, frankly pretty exhausting because they don't know for a long time. And they're figuring it out. So anyway, your advice was, when somebody asks you that question, you can give a quick cursory answer, but then just ask them, how was your college experience? Tell me about your experience going to college. And it was like gold. So thank you for that.
Nell.
Ditto for that. It's a great chance to practice boundaries and not answer a question that you don't want to answer. But I would my piece of advice would be trust your kid. Trust your kid. Let them take the lead and just take your hands off the wheel. That's a great this journey will take you in places that you didn't predict, but you can trust your kid. Ada.
I would say resist the urge to spread yourself too thin. I think and also leverage all of the opportunities that you have at Berkeley Carroll, because those are really some of the things that stood out the most through the college application process. Things like the travel abroad programs were so much fun to talk about in interviews with with coaches. I remember the peer mentoring, the peer tutoring, writing instructor, the affinity groups, and the leadership opportunities you can take within. So just before you start looking out, what can my child do? Please look in at everything that they can do within the Berkeley Carroll environment and all of the leadership positions that they can take. And this is a piece of advice from my daughter. She said, well, don't do things just for the college applications, but she said, be involved in ways that are genuine to you at school and outside of school. So if it's something that you're passionate about and it's going to come out in your college essay, in your interviews, in your supplements. So really just be genuine, I think, about the process. So, and good luck. Good luck.
Please, Yufasa.
I remember, I think it was first semester senior year when it's just all hands on deck and you feel like it's pouring cats and dogs from every direction for everybody. It's a very, very tough time. And I was very much struggling with how to best talk to Hypatia without adding stress to her plate, and to stay abreast of what was going on all fronts. And Joelle suggested that we set up a time to talk. And so I committed to not asking her anything about college until that designated time in the week, an hour long. And she agreed to it. She set the time. We did it weekly. And if it was like 5 minutes, one question I got to ask her, so be it. Sometimes we had a longer conversation, some other things came up, but it really helped both of us. Like, all of this, it was about me figuring out how to best support Hypatia and what was my role in it. And so I was constantly trying to find that balance, and give her all the room and space that she needed to make these decisions. So I would say that, find out what your role is to best support your student, and they will be most appreciative, and they will come to you. Actually, these are teenagers. They know what they want, and sometimes they really want the room to make those decisions.
Well, thank you all so, so much. We so appreciate you taking time. Thank you for all of our attendees for staying a little bit later, but I think you got some really great nuggets of advice and anecdotes from our panelists. So enjoy the rest of your day, and you will get a recording of this soon. Have a good one.